Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to have another Trail/Kiseki conversation because this should come as no surprise. This is actually going to be on the more anime front side of things. I watched the Northern War anime, which is basically it takes place in between the events of Cold Steel 2 and Cold Steel 3, covering the Northern War, which you kind of get a little talk about, dialogue and discussion about in Cold Steel 3. But yeah, it's an anime based around that. And I don't know how most Trail/Kiseki fans feel. I saw one fan who's a Trail/Kiseki fan was not a fan of it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really like the new characters we got, and I hope they kind of get brought into the continuity of the games, but that's neither here nor there. Well, it's important, but either way, the whole thing kind of got me thinking recently about some other stories I think would be interesting to get animated, specifically not just in Trails of Cold Steel, but let's start there, because immediately I'm playing through the games again, because yes, I'm playing through them again. That comes as no surprise. Every so often I'm playing through them again because I just really like them. But I was playing through, I believe it was Cold Steel 2, and you know, obviously you get to the point like on your subsequent playthroughs, it's like you get the black records and it's talking about some of Erebonia's history, and I was thinking like, oh man, the War of the Lions would be a really interesting anime, like, because obviously there's enough details in that story for you to kind of build out a whole like season of an anime, because it wouldn't have to be really long. Because I mean, especially you take some of like the kind of elements you had in the Northern War, you could apply that to the War of the Lions anime and just kind of build upon it in that, you know, but obviously it'd be like even bigger because of how massive the War of the Lions was. I mean, especially because that whole war was over the course of like 5 years. So I think that'd be really interesting because, like I said, there's so much, like, whereas like the Northern War, you still got a lot of the same details in the anime, but the anime was told from a different perspective rather than it being followed from like the Erebonia side, which you got that perspective in the games. Granted, you didn't get all the details, but for the most part, you got the necessary details for the game. But with the anime, you got the Northern Jaeger side of things and just Northumbria in general perspective on it. So I think that's pretty dope. So I think it'd just be interesting, especially because it'd be in a very interesting spot because it'd just be a straight up fantasy series with some slight, well, I wouldn't even call it science fictional elements, because I was about to say, like, because this is so far back in Erebonia's history, like 250 plus years ago, there are no orbments, because the orbital revolution didn't happen until like 50 years prior to the Erebonia arc. So it is a situation of like, right, there wouldn't have been any like battle ornaments, you wouldn't think. So they'd just be straight up fighting. Well, I'm about to say no magic, but it's like, well, we know Rose was around back then, witches existed back then, so did the gnomes. We don't know how active really the gnomes were during that time. Definitely the Hexen clan was, specifically Rose was. But anyway, I think it just, there's enough meat on that bones where like, oh, you could like take the story we know and you could expand upon it and kind of add in some stuff here and there. I think it'd be really dope as an anime just to kind of see that story told. I mean, it's also tragic in the long run knowing where that story leads. Kind of the same thing with the Northern War. It's like, even though the anime kind of ends on this really interesting spot, you're also kind of like, there is a sad element to it, but also there is an uplifting element to it, because like, you know what that story means for Rean going forward into 3 and also a little bit into 4, but it's like, but you also know the Northern Jaeger story and where that kind of went through the back half of the Erebonia arc. So it'd be kind of something like that where it's like, it's sad knowing what the future holds for Erebonia, but it's also uplifting because you know what the future holds for Erebonia. It's kind of that twofold punch of like, yeah, there's going to be some trying, turbulent times afterwards, but it's also going to be some good times afterwards. So it's just kind of an interesting, I think it'd be a great story to be able to be adapted. Like I said, you know enough details from what you picked up from the Black Records, but it's enough that you can still kind of have your way with it, kind of expand upon some of these characters that you get these small references to, and you'd also get some Divine Knight battles. Like I said, I believe at the time there's only like, what, 4 Divine Knights that are active at that time. There's Valimar, Lianne's, the Palatinate Knight, and then obviously Testarossa. I could even see see you ending the anime like with like either like Rean reading the Black Records, or you have like Emperor Eugen reading the Black Records or something like that, because obviously they're passed down to like the emperors. You know, it's kind of an artifact passed down in their family. So I think you could have something like that, or kind of like wink and nod to like what the future holds. Like you get some of the stuff you got later on of like an older Dracos and stuff like that, and the formation of Thor's military academy, and then like maybe you flash forward to like Gilead Osborne, you know. So there's ways that you could like I could envision that in my head. I think it'd be pretty dope, you know. I'm just throwing that out there as like, oh, I think that'd be a pretty dope anime. I'm not sure how many people will be clamoring for it. Like I said, I hadn't really given it much thought until like I was like rereading the Black Records, because I was like, oh, I haven't read these in a while, and I was reading them and I was like, huh. It's like, oh, this would actually make pretty dope. Like, the War of the Lions would be a pretty dope anime. But I started there because that's where my mind went. But I do have other ideas too. I think would be, there's actually a lot of stories that exist in the, not just the Erebonia arc, but the entirety of the Trails arc that I'm like, Trails/Kiseki arcs, that I'm like, oh, like you get a little background on certain things, but like an entire anime dedicated to something like that would be pretty dope. I even think it'd be interesting to kind of get like a Trails/Kiseki anime that's kind of an anthology, because there's too much story, there's too many story beats to ever fully animate the entire stories, whether it's the Labro arc, the Crossbell arc, or the Erebone. There's just too much. You'd be leaving out so many like cool developing moments. That's why the Northern War is like a small enough thing that allowed you to like fill it in with your own story, while also like adding some more context and elements to this particular event. So some of the things that immediately came to my mind, because I was, you know, because I'm playing through Cold Steel 3 again, and the Loewe conversation came up, and I was like, right. And you know, the Hummel of it all, and I was like, I think that'd be an interesting like episode in an anthology where you could follow like Joshua and Loewe's experience post, you know, Hummel, but also like maybe some of their time with the Ouroboros, so you could get something like that. Kind of do the same thing with Lianne, like the time she was wandering around as an immortal. You could make like jump around in an episode of like the time she spent there, you know, up into her finding, you know, Draco's reincarnation in the form of Gilead Osborne, and then eventually her taking up the Grandmaster's offer for her to join Ouroboros. There's also those stories that were told in Trails into Reverie. There's like those 3 or 4 stories that take place like in between Reverie and Kuro no Kiseki, or Trails Through Daybreak. Like, for example, was it Elaine the Bracer? She has a story. There's that story with Rean when he's on vacation with his family. I think they went to Calvert. I can't remember where they went to vacation. I believe they went somewhere in Calvert. And that story thing. Then there's like a Ren's like story. Like those could be like little animated OVAs if made possible. I think those would be pretty dope. I was actually sitting there thinking like, because there's also like the drama CDs too, like that could get animated. Like there's also, because there's the one where the Class 7 went to Ymir, and then there's the one from Ulster that's in Cold Steel 2. So, I mean, I guess, like, if anything, like, some of these stories I'm saying, like, could be animes, it could also end up being drama CDs, but, obviously, I prefer it being anime format. But, I mean, like I said, those drama CD storylines from 1 and 2 could be, from Cold Steel 1 and 2 could be, animated as well. That's why I'm like, an anthology series set, an anthology anime set in the that universe could be really interesting. Because like I said, there's like little story beats you hear there that would be interesting to kind of like jump around the timeline. And you know, like I said, another one would be like, oh, when was it Barkhorn the Roaring Lion went to investigate the Salt Pail situation in Northumbria. Like, you could see when it actually happened, and then him, like, because it's like 28 years ago, at least 28 years ago, I think at the time of, I think even, like, in the Erebonia arc, it was still, like, 28, but it's close to, like, 30 years. But you can see, like, when he ultimately went there to investigate, we actually never find out who his squire was, so you probably get some definitive answers on that. I mean, get some Gralsritter, like, anthology story, like, maybe you have, like, 1 or 2 episodes dedicated to a specific story, or it could just be 1 episode. I don't know, I think it'd be really neat to like fill in the gaps and animate certain stories you kind of gotten throughout the entire Trail/Kiseki arc, that, you know, kind of be able to flesh them out a little bit more. I mean, once again, that's asking a lot, because whatever you add, it would have to kind of be congruent with the canon without, you know, without going outside of the canon. I don't know. These, like I said, these are just something I've been thinking about, and I thought it'd be pretty neat. I'm not saying like, oh my god, they have to do this, they're terrible people, they do it. I'm not saying something ridiculous like that. These are just some thoughts I had that was kind of spitballing, like, oh, these would make pretty interesting animes, or, you know, in some capacity, just what I was thinking at least. But yeah, I've done enough rambling. Like I said, these are just kind of my thoughts. I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you like any of my suggestions about some stuff from the Trail/Kiseki series that could be animated? I didn't mention, you know, these are just some of the things off the top of my head. I'm sure there's plenty of things I wasn't thinking about that could also be animated. So if you got any thoughts about some stuff you would love to see get animated from the Trail/Kiseki series, you know, let it fly in the comments down below. You know, suggestions of some stories you think would be pretty dope to get animated, whether it is in the form of a episodic like anthology, or whether it be a full season situation like what we got with Northern War. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.